he said to me, "Did I ever consider retroactively amending the vesting requirement, Mr. Gladstone?" Of course I did. I was shocked. That was an incredible admission by a top-flight labor economist who didn't have to tell me that. But he followed up by saying, "But I agree with what Mr. Fear said. It wouldn't have been in the best interest of our members at the time." See, the National Labor Relations Act, under that federal law, the Major League Players Union doesn't owe their former players what is called duty of fair representation. So this may come as a shock to a lot of people, but let's say when A-Rod is, and I know we've been harping on A-Rod, it could be anybody. Let's give equal time to a member of the Mets. Let's say when David Wright retires from the game, if he's having any kind of legal difficulties, and if he turns to the union for general counsel support, he can't get any because of the National Labor Relations Board. So essentially, these 874 men are without an advocate. And the Major League Baseball Players Alumni Association is attempting to be their advocate. But again, the union does not have to negotiate with them.
Right. Well, here's the other side of it. And I know that, like you said, they don't have an obligation, but Major League Baseball did right by the Negro League players who, again, it wasn't their fault why they weren't allowed to play baseball. It was a bad time in our country's history. They did the right thing. But Bud Selig, who at times he has committees and he's all involved in all this good stuff, I would think these are 874 alumni, members of his game, that if I was in his position would say, hey, you're not there to make them rich, you're not there to give them something for nothing, but you are there to at least recognize that they've contributed to the history of baseball in some way, shape, or form. Were you able to talk to his office or get a statement from him directly about his position on this?
Well, first of all, the answer to your question is no, I did not get a statement from the commissioner directly. I did have extensive conversations with Mr. Manfred and the gentleman who at the time was his aide. He has since, it's my understanding, been elevated to become the director of public relations for the league, a gentleman by the name of Pat Courtney. Both very professional, both very forthcoming in their replies. They never went more than tops a day before returning my calls or responding to my emails. The commissioner likes to, plenty of times on record, I've seen in print, him talk about the family of baseball. Well, these 874 guys basically think they are outcasts from that family. Mr. Manfred's position is pretty simple. He says, look, the matter can be addressed during the collective bargaining negotiations. It can only be addressed if you want to restore these men into pension eligibility during collective bargaining. There are other side agreements that could be executed. Because, Mike, when you think about it, let me give you some context. This happened to another class of people. They were called the pre-1947 players. Men like, your listeners will probably remember Dolph Camille, Pete Koskarot of the Brooklyn Dodgers. These were men who did not play after 1946. That's why they're called, after 1947. That's why they're called the pre-47 players. And in October of 1997, these guys were given quarterly payments of $2,500 each. It was basically a life annuity, and it died with them. Pete Koskarot was one of the 4 people who never accepted the payment because it did not include what most pensions do, a designated beneficiary clause to a loved one or to a spouse. So to get this back on track, I'm sorry I detoured a moment. Major League Baseball could do the same thing.
Sure.
The payments to the Negro Leaguers are not true pensions. They're life annuities. When a veteran of the Negro League passes on, for example, Sam Jethro, the National League Rookie of the Year in 1953, recently passed, that payment, that charitable contribution, as it's called, that died with him. A lot of the ball players are of two minds. They might be at, some of these guys are pushing 80, 85. Bill Glynn, who homered in his last at-bat in the 1954 World Series as a member of the Cleveland Indians. He was one of the, I think there are 375 men who have hit 3 home runs in one game. Billy Glynn is one of those guys, and he's very mad. He's got a wife, and he said, a pension is supposed to take care of a spouse. I don't know whether or not, Mr. Gladstone, he told me, I don't know whether or not I would sign an agreement that only gave me $7,500 to $10,000 a year. Some ball players like Don Dillard, who was a pinch hitter extraordinaire for the Cleveland Indians and old Milwaukee Braves, he's running I don't want to use the pejorative term trailer park, but a motor park
Sure.
down in Waterloo, South Carolina. He said, I've spoken to my wife about it, and quite frankly, she's fine with taking the $10,000 a year. Our bills are paid, our children are out of the house, and let's face it, Mr. Gladstone, everyone during this economy can use some extra money. And then there are people who are really conflicted, like the aforementioned Jimmy Hutto, as I spoke, or Ken Wright. Ken Wright had a cup of coffee. He was initially drafted by the Kansas City Royals, and he finished his career with the Bronx Bombers with the 1972 Yankees. And he told me, I don't know whether or not I want to sell my soul for a payment that's essentially $800, $900 a month. I want to be restored into pension eligibility. The point, Mike, is that you can only be restored into pension eligibility through collective bargaining. If a side agreement is executed, some people say it's better than nothing. But,
right.
A lot of people are hardliners, and they may want to hire an employment labor attorney, someone who's really skilled and knowledgeable in employment labor law to try to be restored back to 1980. Think about how much retroactive money these 874 guys would be owed then.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Well, the point that I saw, and I got this from your website, which, for those listening, it's abittercupofcoffee.com, and it's from David Clyde. He talks about Donald Fehr and the Svengali-like influence he has over the players, and I agree with that. I mean, look, this is a guy that got them to sit out for the end of the end of 1994. I think that if there wasn't some kind of agreement or pressure being put on Major League Baseball from a lot of points, they were ready to set out all of 1995. He was a tough negotiator. His biography kind of points that out. He very rarely backed down from Major League Baseball. He could get this done. And I guess that's where I agree with Clyde. If this was a priority, Donald Fehr would have gotten this done. Now, he's not in charge anymore, so you can't blame him now. So it's really, I guess, a matter of how badly does Michael Weiner want to get this done.
Well, Michael Weiner, to his credit, was the first player union executive director, and there have only been 3 or 4, Marvin Miller and Don Fehr, and I believe Ken Moffitt, for a very brief spell, was leading the players union. But Michael Weiner convened a meeting at the Park Avenue offices of Major League Baseball on Thursday, October 1st. And he said, I'm in favor of doing something. Now, from what I understand at that meeting, he said specifically he's in favor of a life annuity. And a life annuity, again, could be executed any time. How much that would be? Probably at the very least, it would probably mirror what the Negro Leaguers got in 1997, $7,500 to $10,000 a year.
Wow.
But I